Welcome to Sinister Black Echoes, where we'll share horror stories that make your skin crawl. Today we have 3 true stories that shows the importance of trusting your gut and why it helps to be street smart. All 3 stories are about young kids who get lured to enter dangerous individuals' cars. Stay tuned to find out what happened to them.
This happened to me back in 2007. I was 9 years old, and my brother was 14. My mom had sent us out of the house with about $30 to go to a movie and maybe get a bite to eat afterwards. After watching the movie, it was getting pretty dark and I was ready to go home. But my brother wanted to get something to eat first, and we agreed to walk to McDonald's, which was only a couple blocks from the movie theater. On our way there, we were stopped and approached by a man. He had a friendly smile plastered on his face, and he was holding his child's hand. There didn't seem to be anything off about this man. He was average looking and seemed to be nothing more than a father having a day out with his son. "Hey, do you two think you could give my son and I a hand real quick?" he asked. "We need help loading a mattress onto the back of our truck. The truck is just up the road, sorry, but we don't really have time," my brother said. It was at this time I noticed the little boy. He was about 8 years old, and he looked abnormally thin. He had a blank expression on his face and wore clothes that were much too big for him. I turned my attention back to the man, who was now mumbling to my brother about how it would only take a second. My brother kindly declined again. Being the helpful kid that I was, I joined in with the man and tried to persuade my brother that we should help them out. I turned to my brother, who was now staring down at the little boy. My brother had a disturbed expression on his face as he looked down at the child. The child stared back at my brother blankly. I didn't understand why my brother had that look on his face. He grabbed my hand and said, "I think that's my mom over there." He pulled me, and we began walking away from the man. I didn't understand what was going on, and why my brother had just lied about our mom being there. He didn't let go of my hand and practically dragged me until we were a far distance away from the man and his son. I looked back and could still see the man holding his son's hand. Only now, he wasn't smiling anymore. He had a look of fury on his face, and he yanked the little boy by the arm, and they walked away. I pulled away from my brother's grasp and bombarded him with questions. He shushed me and pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. He dialed in a number and began pacing around nervously while talking on the phone. I remember the police showing up, and my mom came soon after. She took me home, but my brother was left with the police. I asked my mother what was going on, and she said that the police were just questioning my brother because the man we had encountered was dangerous. That's all she told me, and I went to bed. By the next morning, I had almost completely forgotten about the incident, and things went back to normal. It wasn't until a few days ago that these memories flooded back into my mind. I decided to call my now 22-year-old brother to get some answers. When I brought the ordeal back up him, he finally gave me the information I wanted to know. And now that I know everything, I understand how freaking terrifying our encounter with the man truly was. My brother told me that while the man was constantly trying to convince us to come with him, he happened to look at the little boy. The little boy then looked at my brother with his eyes filled with terror and mouthed the words, "I'm not his son. Please help me." Then his expression went back to being completely blank, almost as if he had never said anything at all. This was why he had become so freaked out and snatched me away. When he called the police, they hurried down and he described the man the best he could. They couldn't do much with the little information my brother had given, because we hadn't even seen the car that the man supposedly had. My brother told me that a few weeks into the investigation, they had found the little boy who was with the man Unalive. His body had been cruelly dumped in the woods. The cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration. If my brother and I had gone with the sicko, we likely would have met the same fate. He obviously couldn't have kidnapped both of us on his own, as my brother was a fairly strong fellow. That meant he had other pedo partners who would help him snatch up unsuspecting kids. Unfortunately, they were never able to catch any of the sick individuals who did this to the child. But the man was definitely not his father. His real parents had already been searching for their missing son for almost a month. The creeps had managed to kidnap the poor kid, and used him as their puppet to try and kidnap other children. Every time I think about the boy, I feel a deep pity for him. He was only a year younger than I was at the time, and I can only imagine how terrible it must be to slowly starve to death. And to the disgusting individual who starves and unalive children, you'd better hope we never meet.
Enjoying the story so far? Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more captivating content like this. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on the latest adventures and terrifying tales. Thank you for your support. My stepmom didn't like us much, but she told my sister, 3 years older, and I this experience growing up to scare us out of being stupid. It was my family's stranger danger story. My stepmom, we're going to call her Macy, grew up as a kind of a privileged teen in the 70s, and her mom had moved their family over here, the States, from England when she was about 9. She went to a pretty nice high school in a really nice town. There, she made friends with a girl, Lily, who didn't exactly run with Macy's type of crowd, popular, stereotypical, etc. They really hit it off, and Lily would take Macy out to do her type of stuff, hiking, fishing, sailing. There's even a hilarious set of pictures of them camping. My stepmom has raccoon eyes, and looks like she hates everything. Anyways, because of Lily's influence, the two of them would do stuff like that a good amount. One Sunday they decided to go hike in some hills about an hour away. Macy put on what I'm sure were her extremely expensive hiking shoes, and the two of them drove off to the hiking trails. Lily parked in this big clearing with makeshift parking spots, you know. Like a piece of wood marking the head of a space, but there were no other cars there. This was only important in hindsight. They started hiking up the hill, off the path, because Lily fancied herself as something of a badass. The hike was nothing extraordinary. If you asked my stepmom, she would just lament for 15 minutes how sticky and buggy it was. Anyways, they reached the top of the hill and my stepmom was done. The polished, pampered side of her was coming out, and she groaned until Lily, begrudgingly, said okay. They would rest and then walk down again, slower. They had been heading down the hill for maybe 10 minutes when Macy started complaining again. Lily conceded to walking down the side of the road instead of the rough hiking trail. So, there they are, probably looking like a couple of tools geared up for hiking and walking down a crappy road. And after not even 5 minutes, a truck pulled up next to them. It was red and rusty, and just generally looked like a clunker. The guy driving rolled down the window, and the girls looked in through the passenger's side window. He had a big beard, a baseball cap pulled down, and long brown hair. He greeted them and even smiled through his beard, asking if they needed a ride. Macy described him as charming, and even cute. Lily still says the moment he greeted them her hackles went up. Despite her better judgment, my stepmom convinced her to get in the truck. It must only be a 10-minute drive down to the car, tops. The two girls opened the passenger's door to this rusty old thing. And the guy directed them behind the seat to get into the back. They settled in and the truck started rumbling forwards. Lily always says that was the point it hit her what a mistake they had just made. The back seat was clean enough, but there was a rope on the floor behind the driver's seat and 4 boxes of saran wrap half hanging out from under the passenger's seat. It seemed creepy and weird, but Lily didn't want to freak my stepmom out, so she just kept her mouth shut. After 10 minutes, the woods didn't look any clearer, and they hadn't seen another car the whole time. Lily asked how long he thought it would be. He said he was taking a different route down the hill and had to stop somewhere to get something first. That was it. The girls were 16-17, and Lily didn't want to press the issue. She was scared. She can remember his hair, because she was sitting behind him. He looked like a woodsy guy, but his hair was super tangled and dirty. She noticed crusted mud on his collar and tried to find something identifiable about him, but just got scared the more she picked up on little details. He was youngish, strong-looking, and had a 1-foot height advantage on both of them. So, they didn't ask any more questions, and he didn't offer any information, and they drove on. Several minutes after that, they reached a tiny shack/log cabin looking place right there in a clearing of trees. There was an old stump where someone had been chopping wood and a huge axe stuck into the log. Lily was definitely on red alert now. The guy turned off the truck and slipped out of it, saying, "I'll be right back. Don't get out." And he disappeared into the house. Lily tried to talk to my stepmom about how she was incredibly uncomfortable, but she mostly just dismissed it. Lily started begging, increasingly freaked out, and finally put her foot down, demanding Macy exited the truck with her. So, they got out and walked around the front of the vehicle. The house was about 50 yards in front of them. Why this guy would have left two young girls in the truck alone while going into the house is beyond me, and they wandered around, looking at it, hesitantly. If this guy really was decent and just trying to give them a ride, it would be super rude to just run off, right? My stepmom had this strict upbringing when it came to manners and a public persona, and she saw it as an issue of that nature. So she actually started to head back to the truck, opening the front door to climb in behind the driver's seat. Lily was pissed off and followed her to yell some more. On the driver's side floor, half hidden under the seat, there was a big hatchet. It had dried red/brown stains covering the blade and stuck to the floor under it. Lily understandably lost her mind, and seeing it, my stepmom started getting hysterical. They decided that leaving was by far their best option at this point, and just booked it off the side of property into the trees. They bumbled around in the trees for a little while until Lily was fairly confident they were on their way back down the hill. My stepmom cried all the way down. Lily felt bad about it, but was also completely freaked out that he would heart it and kept trying to calm her down. When they finally got back down to the bottom and saw the old wooden fence that surrounded the original parking area, they were relieved. But as they got closer, they saw it. The truck. It was parked on the other side of the gravelly makeshift lot. Just sitting there, facing the other way innocently. They couldn't see if anyone was in it, and of course Macy wanted to run for the car, but Lily was super hesitant. She managed to calm my stepmom down, saying she wanted to wait before running out into the open, to see what was out there. Remember, this is the 70s. No cell phones. There was no ranger station or anyone around. The parking lot was big and empty and open, and who knows what would have happened if they decided to stroll across it. Thankfully Lily convinced my stepmom to chill, and the two of them hunkered down against a big tree, hidden by bushes and other trees, and waited it out for what was seemed to be a couple of hours, when dark started to fall. All the animals started coming out and making noises, and my stepmom, predictably, started getting antsy about this and bothering Lily, who was tired and moments away from giving in. She was just planning their dash to the car when they heard a clunk. Across the twilight-lit lot, they watched as one of the back doors of their car swung open. And the bearded guy slid his way out of the back seat. He got out, shut the door, looked around at the surrounding woods for several moments, and then walked back to his truck. The truck lumbered past their car and out of sight. Several minutes after watching him drive away, they sprinted to their car as fast as they could, jumped in, and peeled out before they had even shut the doors. If this guy is still alive, he's really old, but still, let's just not meet. Now on to our last story. My dad worked at a beachside bar grill when I was little. In addition to being a chef, he ran and DJ'd the bike and car shows for the restaurant. The car shows were usually on Wednesdays, and the bike nights were on Friday, a small detail, but important to the story. The car shows were on a school night, so I was rarely allowed to go, but my father would often bring me to the bike nights. By all accounts, I was an adorable and pretty mellow kid, and the bikers absolutely loved me. And yes, you might say that this was no environment for a little girl, but I learned a lot about loyalty and friendship from being around bikers. My dad told me that some of them would call into the restaurant just to ask if I would be there that week. And they'd often bring me stuffed animals and candy. My favorite of the bikers was a man that I affectionately called Uncle Teddy. He was a friend of my parents and an absolute mountain of a man, around 6 feet 8 inches and 400 pounds easily. He was an ex-Marine who loved his Harley and his cigars, and every week for 5 years he would bring me a Butterfinger and a Beanie Baby. I was 6 years old the night it happened, 2003. My father had brought me to the bike show as he normally did, but I couldn't keep my eyes open past 8 p.m. The show didn't end until 10 p.m., so my dad had gotten into the habit of putting an air mattress in the back of the restaurant, and he and Teddy would check on me every 15 minutes. I was asleep when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was a man that I'd seen around before, and he wasn't dressed in biker gear. He was wearing a short-sleeved plaid shirt and jeans and looked greasy, but not particularly scary. He smiled at me and told me that his name was Sean, that he was a friend of my dad's, and that my dad had asked him to drive me home. My parents had tried to ingrain stranger danger in me, and they told me 1,000 times to never talk to anyone I didn't know, but he knew mine and my dad's name, as well as the nickname everyone called me. I totally bought it. I got up, grabbed the flamingo Beanie Baby Uncle Teddy had given me, and started to walk towards the parking lot. Sean didn't have a bike, he had a very old 4-door sedan. He opened the back door for me, and I climbed inside. You know how in senior citizens' homes, they often have plastic-wrapped couches or chairs? That's what the back seat of his car was like, totally covered in plastic. I think now that it was probably so there would be no trace of DNA left behind. Sean started to drive away, and to this day, I can't believe how lucky I got. He had parked the car behind the restaurant in a way that it wasn't immediately visible to the bike show, but as we pulled away, I saw Teddy heading through the door, presumably to check on me. He just happened to look up at that exact moment, probably to acknowledge the car, and I smiled at him. Uncle Teddy didn't waste a moment, didn't even stop to tell my dad what was going on. He got on his bike and was on that car's ass before we had even totally cleared the avenue that led out of the parking lot. The avenue that you had to take to get the restaurant was long, about 1.5 miles, and then you had to go down another long road before you made it to the highway. Sean saw Teddy approaching in his rear view and attempted to speed up, but he must have realized it was futile, he'd been seen, and Teddy had his license plate hashtag and a good description. Sean stopped the car, turned around and told me very calmly to get out of the car. I was scared by this point, and I didn't waste a moment climbing out and running to Teddy. Sean burnt rubber driving away, and Teddy held me for a moment before putting me on the back of his bike and taking me back to my dad. By the time we got back, cops had been called, and they were surrounding the place. A lot of the show had emptied out, and my dad was sobbing/screaming on the sidewalk outside of the restaurant. I'll never forget that moment. I ran up to him, hugged him as tightly as I could, and then the rest is all a blur. I talked to cops, I talked to my dad, I even went down to the station and spoke to a sketch artist. I didn't get to home until around 2 a.m. Teddy never left my side. An APB, All Points Bulletin, was put out on the vehicle, which had been reported as stolen. The sketch circulated around the local news stations, but it didn't turn up anything concrete. At one point I was asked to look at a lineup, but none of them were him. Fast forward about 8 years. I was 14, and my dad decided I was old enough to know what happened. Sean had been spotted lurking around the bike show a few times before that night and was a customer at the restaurant fairly regularly. He knew my nickname because he had been watching me for over a month. He knew my schedule and consequently, how often Teddy and my dad checked on me. When his evil plan was botched and Teddy brought me back to the show, everyone had left. I had assumed it was because the police had been investigating a crime scene, but I was wrong. They were all out looking for Sean. Teddy told them the make and model of the car with a description of Sean. And one of the guys thought that he sounded like a guy that frequented one of the biker bars downtown. I remember my dad paused for a long time, and I asked him what happened after that. They found him, he said.
And that wraps up this video. The moral of these stories: trust your gut and look out for warning signs. And please, do not enter a stranger's car. To all of you who have followed along on this journey, thank you for joining us in this adventure. If you would like to hear more in the future, please like and subscribe. Your support and enthusiasm mean the world to us. Until next time.